Welcome to A Bit of Board Games, a casual podcast documenting the many failures and hopefully successes of Waffle Games, as we learn the ins and outs of board game design and self-publishing. Join us on this journey as we talk about a bit of life, a bit of design, and a bit of board games. Welcome back to another episode of A Bit of Board Games. What episode is this, guys?
64, I think.
Oh, nice. Okay, today's July 12th. This is 2023, and this is episode 64. I did not prep before this one. I prepped things to talk about. Forgot what episode it was. With us today is me, Steven, game designer and artist. Trevor, game designer and cool guy and operations dude. And Ralph, art director, designer, card aficionado, other titles. Yeah. How's guys? How you doing? Trevor, you were gone for a bit. You went on a trip?
Was gone. And it's always a new reason, but I was traveling to Tennessee with my wife and kid, and
your daughter turned like 12 over the trip too, right?
12 months. Yes.
I didn't even mean to do that on purpose, but that's great.
Yeah. No, she turned one since I've been gone. It was just a few days ago, so super exciting. It all goes too fast, but the trip itself was great. It was over the 4th of July, which was a lot of fun, going to Tennessee and kind of being out in the countryside during the 4th, which was a great time. But Steven, you know this, as the kids get older, it's a little bit more difficult to travel because they're more aware of what's going on and what they like, and especially what they don't like. And so they make you very aware of that. And especially when you get delayed flights and all that sort of stuff, it just adds a level of excitement to the entire thing. So glad to be home, but and glad to be back here too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Ralph, how you been? When did we record last? Did we record after 4th of July, or it was right before it, wasn't it? Wait, no, that was like a week ago. We recorded after.
Yeah, we did record after. Although we mentioned it before as well.
So now we're gonna mention it for a third time. No.
Yeah.
How was your week?
Pretty good so far. Yeah, work's good. We bought the most noteworthy thing going on in my life is that we bought a new bed. Much needed. A nice big queen size bed finally, and
amateur
nice.
Queen size.
Oh yeah, you have a king.
Yeah, I can't go back now. It's a problem.
Yeah.
That's awesome though. Congrats. The bed's a big deal.
What did you like go with like one of the ones that like shipped to you or anything like that, or
yeah we
which
went
brand?
Well, that brings me to today's sponsor, Nectar. No, I wish. Nectar. We went with Nectar. It was like there were a lot of options, but I thought, I read plenty of reviews. We looked into stuff, and
nice.
It's great. The assembly was really nice. It says though you have to leave it for 3 to 5 hours to actually inflate all the way, because it comes all rolled up and like weirdly squished, and then you open it and it's like allow for 3 to 5 hours. Problem is I put it together at like 9:30 last night, and it was like time for bed, and so one last night we had to sleep in our old bed.
Oh man, honey, we're gonna stay up till after midnight.
Yeah, tonight will be the first night that we get to try it out, but we already tested it, and it's great. I love the way it's so comfy.
We got a Tufton Needle one like 5 years ago or something. Now we've had it for a while, and that was like a male one too that came in, and it's been great. It's still awesome. So
I'm looking these up because I'm so intrigued. I hear of the brand Purple all the time because that's the one that's on TV.
Yeah, I see that one
too. Is Tufton Needle kind of the same sort of thing where it's like shipped to you?
Yeah, and I think they have. I mean, I don't know what they have now, but when I got it, they only had like 2 options, like the standard and then like the mint one. And I specifically got that one because I get super hot when I sleep and just like uncomfortably warm like a lot of times. And so this one was like for cool sleepers and whatever. And it's been great. So it was the Tufton Needle like mint version thing. and we got the king size. It was great.
And okay, so you get to decide like how firm it is.
I don't know.
Yeah, there's all sorts of options. I know it's that way for Nectar anyway.
Back in my day, we didn't have those options.
For purple as well, you kind of they ask you like there's all sorts of questions like what kind of sleeper are you? It's weird, but you end up you can get a bunch of different types. Like they'll have memory foam options, or do you prefer a more firm mattress or whatever, and you kind of just pick your preference and go from there. But they're great. Oh, and we went with Nectar. I think part of the reason was because they were having a big sale too, so we got a really good deal on their mattresses and frames. So
nice.
Yeah, pretty cool.
All right.
Cool.
Well, we really aren't sponsored by any mattress company. But
we will be after tonight.
We'll be sponsored, but they'll be fighting for our attention. Trevor, you get a different brand than we have, and so then all three of them will just bidding war for our for spots.
I didn't get one shipped to me. I got the one that's local, and you go and it's in a warehouse, and you go and you lay on all of them, and you go, too firm, too soft.
Yeah.
This is probably good, but who knows?
So you did like a Goldilocks scenario over there.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you go to like Denver Mattress Company or something?
No.
It doesn't.
Oh man, American Furniture Warehouse is where we got ours.
Nice. Anyway, so guys, I playtested the game last night.
Yeah, I want to hear all about this.
So,
set the stage. Where'd you go? How'd this happen?
So over the weekend, I was working on our prototype, and I posted on our Instagram and sent you guys kind of some shots of just this, like the pieces I was cutting out. So I essentially mocked up some files for like all the tokens and kind of got a polished version of the player board and printed those out on label paper. And then I got like a chipboard, which was like a thin cardboard, like for like tokens that you'd get. And then I used the label paper and stuck all the tokens and player boards on those and like cut them all out. My hand was cramped up a little bit after all that. So I had a lot of the tokens and the boards and like everything ready, and I'm like, and so okay, so there's a local game store near us that does a game design meetup like once a month, and so I've been wanting to go for a little bit, and so this one was coming up. I'm like, like I don't think we're gonna have the prototype ready like to test, and I haven't made the changes to the game that we wanted to make before this, so maybe I'll just check it out, get the lay of the land, network with some people, then bring our game next time. But then as it kept getting closer, I finished those pieces and ended up going through our rulebook and make some changes. Went through every card and updated the number of charges and damage and other things that we had issues with from our previous playtest, and printed the cards yesterday morning and cut them out during my lunch break. And then I'm like, I was getting ready to go to this playtest yesterday evening, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll just bring it. Like, what the heck? Like, I'll just bring it just in case.
Ralph, what I'm getting from this is that he doesn't need us. We're irrelevant at this point. Steven's just making it happen. We can just step aside. Steven, do you want to just finish the podcast by yourself? You're doing a great job.
I'll just like move back and forth as different people. Anyway, so it was just kind of like an afterthought of like, I guess I'll just bring it. So I get there, and it was only like there are only 3 other people there. So they said it's usually like 3 or 4 people, and like they have 1 or 2 games that like someone's testing. And so one of the guys there had a game that he had brought a couple other times and they had tested. And so like he kind of was telling them about the changes he made and what they had done differently with that. And I just kind of awkwardly walk up to this table and just like stand there while he's talking for a couple minutes. I'm just like, is this the game design meetup? Because then there were like a bunch of other people in this room like playing other games and like Magic and stuff. And so I'm just like, someone told me it was the guy in the blue t-shirt, so I'm gonna go over and talk to this guy. And anyway, so then sat there, and then they're like, well, like they look over at me like, well, like, what do you got? I'm like, yeah. So I open my box and like pull out the boards and like all the things and start talking them through everything. And they're like, okay, like cool. And like I kind of go over like a brief overview of like what the game is, and then they ask like a few questions, and then like, how long does it take? I'm like, oh, like we're shooting for like hour ish is what we're shooting for. Previous times, it's been like hour 15 for like first time players, and they're like, okay, cool, like let's play it. I'm like, okay. This was our first 4-player playtest.
Oh,
Cool.
wow.
It was also the first playtest that wasn't friends or family, like people, strangers that I have never met.
Enemies.
They were out to get me.
Competitors.
And so we set it all up, kind of, I'm like, okay, cool, like let's do this. You guys get your, draw this many blueprints to start, place your tokens here, whatever, get everything set up. And then we started playing. And so like as we were going, they had questions like, hey, like what does this mean? Some of the text still has like the placeholder stuff of like bracket SC bracket for like that's going to be a shadecore icon in the text. That was one thing I forgot to do and probably wouldn't have had time to do anyway. So yeah, we played through, and like it went awesome, dude. Like they had a good time. Like there was tense moments. There were times where people would be like, they'd get doubles to fill shade cores, and they were like, yes, and like super stoked. Times where they're like, someone's like, all right, I'm gonna hit you with this and like do like 3 damage, and they're like, nope, trap. It goes back at you and it kills their companion, and then like hits them for something else. Like when that guy was almost gonna die, that happened. And guess who won?
Did you finally win a game?
No, I was the first one eliminated again.
Steven always loses.
I'm always the first one out. Like every single time.
How could we guess who won? We don't even know these people.
I know. I was just hoping you'd think it was me, and then I could.
I did think it was you.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. But it was tense. Like it was interesting because these guys all played differently than I play, and differently than I've seen other people test it. So like this was also the first time we had the skill tree, like the upgrades on the side in this manner, and they loved that. Like one of the guys, like that was his favorite thing about the game. He's like, I'm a video gamer, just to plays video games. He's like, so I love like upgrades and skill trees, and he's like, this just like I love this so much. And he even saved up tokens to buy one of those extra upgrade tokens. He saved up his scrap to buy an extra one, and like he spent a lot of stuff on that, but he really wanted more upgrades. So one guy did the entire defense track on the board. One guy did the entire offense track on the board. I was going utility, but no, didn't make it to Mastercraft because I died as I hit Mastercraft, so I didn't really get to the last upgrade. But where's my?
That's really cool.
What did we decide on the defensive upgrades?
We're gonna have to look at them. And we're back. Technical difficulties there, but we're gonna talk about the playtest. So, I'm just gonna be honest, people. We just went over a bunch of the stuff in the playtest. I'm telling them for the first time, and I found out that it kind of just cut a recording at some point in there. So now you won't see how excited they got about all the things I told them. But
it's all mundane, and we're just gonna be like, yeah. Tell us the next thing.
That's amazing. Good job. Okay. Playtest, July 11th. That's when the date that we playtested it.
So you didn't say that the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I said it was yesterday.
I am surprised.
People could figure it out. So, anyway, I took a bunch of notes. Overall, playtest was awesome. It went really well. Everyone had a good time. The biggest thing at the end, they said that they would play it again. So that's always a good sign.
Great thing to hear.
Yeah. There were some really tense moments of like, people attacking for heavy damage, almost killed this guy. He activated a trap that deflected the damage back to that guy, killing his companion, a bunch of stuff. So it was kind of like a lot of tense moments. There were some good moments. People would, roll for their cores, hit doubles, and they're like, yes! Super excited about that. So like people not being bored is a great thing. But having like these experiences where you can see the excitement or see like the joy. I wrote this one thing down. This guy on his turn near the end of the game, he was just like, something really basic that he said. He was like, it's tough choices. Like, really, so he was like really just deliberating on what to do near the end of the game. He was like,
I love it.
He had a bunch of cards. He had stockpiled a bunch of resources and trying to figure it out. And like, he's like, man, I don't know what to do. And not in a way of like, I'm confused, I don't know what to do. More of just like there's too many options that he could do of like that could work. Um, in general, like positive feedback, people thought the game had great readability. Was one thing. They're like, I can look at my player board. They like the layout of that. One of the guys said his first impression of it, like he saw the player boards, like, oh, like those are cool. Like they thought they were like unique player boards, and those caught the attention, like the design of the shape and how it was laid out. They also liked how the information was arranged on there, so they could understand clearly what they had. But then the
You guys did a
readability.
great job with that.
Thanks,
sure.
man. Then the readability of the game, like they could see. This one guy was like, I wasn't really focusing on what other people were doing, but I could look at their play area and see how much of a threat they were based on what color cards they had out there, based on like the tier that they had.
Yeah,
and so
that's cool.
he's like being able to glance at that, being able to glance at their boards, kind of see where they were on the XP tracker or the health tracker to see where they were at. Like he's like, it was, they all agreed like the readability was great. Like they could clearly tell what other people were doing, and like without having to know all the details, and clearly kind of see where they were at. Like you can see how much resources they have. You can see what their health is at and stuff like that. So yeah, it was good. Some of the negative things that came up was kind of how we dealt with corruption. Which currently this was like a new strategy that we were trying, where essentially you'd get corrupted 2 times. You'd put 2 tokens up on your health tracker, and then at the beginning of every turn you would take 2 damage, but then those would just stay there until you crafted an item to cure that. And so that would happen at the beginning of your turn. So if you didn't have the item crafted already, you'd always take that damage until you would do it. So like the first turn that you were corrupted, you'd always take damage, and you couldn't prevent it unless you had like planned ahead to craft this potion, which was kind of our idea. But also like if you crafted that potion, then people might just see that and be like, oh, he has a potion, I'm not going to corrupt him because he'll just cure it. So like it kind of works against some of what we were trying to do. One suggestion from one of the players, his suggestion was to maybe move that step to the end of your turn, is when you take the corruption. So it's still costly in the sense that you have to spend an action to cure however much corruption. And so that's an interesting thing that we're gonna dive into. Kind of chat through some of that stuff and what that looks like.
One thought I had, we don't have to go deep into this, but one thought I had was I like the idea of putting it at the end of the turn. I think that's a great idea. The fact that it takes an action really forces you to decide, okay, is this worth removing or not?
Right.
The fact that it's just 1 damage, let's say at the end of each turn, kind of becomes irrelevant. I'm almost curious if, to stay on theme with the idea of a corruption spread. So I almost wonder if at the end of your turn, you take the damage and you add another corruption, and they continue to add at the end of your turn 1 every time until you just finally decide, okay, I've had too much.
Sure.
I'm going to actually remove it. And so that way, what that could do for us as part of the cards is our corruptions never need to do more than 1 corruption. It never needs to do 2 or 3, because once you put that on there, it'll automatically begin to tick and multiply over time. And if any, and the thought would be, I guess, if anyone adds like attacks with another corruption, it would just expedite that process. So instead of, let's say you have 2 at the end of your turn and you get attacked again by another corruption, you place a 3rd. So now next time around, you're not adding a 3rd, you're adding a 4th, and you got to decide, okay, am I going to finally remove that? I have thought this entire time that corruption is something that I don't necessarily seek out as a combat card.
Yeah.
Because it does, like one damage every time that they can remove at any point just almost seems irrelevant unless earlier we were like, unless you stack it, and then at that point it's but the idea of maybe having something that can grow over time and do more damage if they don't touch it, I think could potentially be a cool way to maneuver that.
Yeah.
We don't have to discuss it now. It's just a thought.
I'm just thinking about that. Yeah. Let's definitely, we'll talk through that, and I'll kind of tell you kind of what we experienced during the play as well. The other the other like chunky, not words are hard, clunky thing that just didn't feel super smooth was kind of how scrap works in the game. And it's like you start your turn, you draw scrap, and then most of the time you're just either using another action to get a couple more scrap, and then using another action to just throw your scrap right back to get more cores. And so it kind of just felt like this weird, just added step of like draw scrap so that you can make cores. So like we use scrap to craft a few things like that you can just always craft on your board. You use it to buy shade cores, and you use it as one of the two resources in crafting blueprints, the shade cores and the scrap. But half the time you're just saving scrap to then buy more cores, and it just feels like this awkward kind of, like I said, added step, and it just feels weird. It's like, oh, okay, let me draw my scrap, and then immediately just now I'm going to use this scrap. So
it's like resource jumping.
Yeah. And so I don't know what the solution is to that. I've got a couple ideas that I've been toying with that I'll swing by you guys and kind of see what you think. So that's just one thing to think about. Another thing is one of the guys says this game feels and seems like it should be like an engine builder game, where essentially like engine builder is like you're making things, and then those things make it easier to make the next level things and the higher level things. So like you're kind of building this engine that keeps pumping out more resources or gives you like more things. Like the more you build, the easier it gets to make more things.
It's not a bad analysis. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
However,
well, Forge is kind of the purpose of the Forge, right?
Right, and like the goal is like you're getting to Mastercraft. You've got more things available to you. He said it seemed like it should be that way, but it didn't feel that way because like the whole game you're doing the same thing. So like you draw your 3 scrap on your first turn, and even when you're in Mastercraft, you're still just drawing your 3 scrap, maybe 4 if you had an upgrade. He said, but he's like, I'm crafting all these things, but it doesn't feel like I have an upgraded forge in a sense. It just kind of felt like I'm still just doing the same thing I was doing the whole time. So I think we need to look at how, and maybe we add something that kind of ramps up the gameplay a little bit, and maybe that solution is every time you level up, you like get an extra scrap every turn. So then like you start drawing more scrap if we keep that mechanic, whatever. Something to make it feel like you're actually getting better at what you're doing, or feel like you have more available to you. Because then one issue when you get to the end, if you're still just getting that 3 scrap every turn and you craft one Mastercraft item, it's going to take you like so many turns to be able to get another thing out there. And it almost feels bad that you're like, I'm now at this tier, but it's still, I'm not any better at it in a sense. So that's another thing that we'll have to talk through. People said in general, like the pace of the game felt good. It was more of like that ramp of like how much you could accomplish didn't feel as like you were actually progressing in a sense.
Yeah.
So
I hear him. I don't necessarily agree with that analysis, to be honest. Like
sure.
If he goes into it with the mindset of it being an engine builder,
he said that. So he did, like very beginning of the game, he was like, this looks like an engine builder.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the game, he was like, it looks like an engine builder, but it didn't feel like it. And I'm like,
and that's why I go, well, because it's not.
That's I said that.
And it's like you can't fault the game for not being what it's not trying to be,
Sure.
So like I totally hear that we could consider, ramping up something at the end of the game.
Yeah.
But the fact that it hits the benchmark of the time limit we're looking for, and also it accomplishes, in my mind, what our original goal was at the end of the game, where you're not getting so much scrap that you're obviously just going to buy Mastercraft after, more and more and more and more. The original goal was you could still build out any of these tiers at the end of the game because they're still valuable in different ways. You can pump out the lower tier ones quicker, but now you have access to the higher tier ones. And that's what gives you the ability. And that's what really is your Forge, like, engine builder upgrade, I guess, if you wanted to say, is all about. So
sure.
I totally hear it. I mean, I think it's worth considering, but I don't know if I agree with the solution, I guess.
Yeah. And that's the thing with playtesting, like, it's taking everything people say at face value. This was based on their opinions and their experience with it.
Right.
If they play it again, it could be a different experience. It's also like taking these what people say, the feedback and their suggestions, and kind of seeing like what's at the root of that. Like, what's causing them to feel that way. And like maybe it's not like just adding more scrap in the pool, but maybe there's something else that could make you still feel like you're able to accomplish more as you progress. The difference with like engine builders, a lot of times they have like permanent cards. So think of like Century Golem edition, the game with like the crystals and you're crafting the golem.
Yeah.
So like with that, when you craft things, you then are adding these new cards to your deck that when you then get them back, give you more resources.
Yeah.
So you're cycling this thing through. So like
not even necessarily more, just you have more possibilities of combinations.
Yeah, more possibilities, and then like, but a lot of engine builders, like you might get things that then give you more resources passively, change how you play, may give you more action. So like there are random things that let you do that in our game, and so maybe part of that what we can do is look at our upgrade skill tree, like so when you get upgrades, and have those, you choose which track you want to go on, but maybe have those feel like it's making things easier for you depending on your track in a certain way.
Let's make the third tier of utility. Mastercraft cards cost half the resources, like something like that, where it's like we can
figure it out.
We could very easily modify anything we want to accomplish that goal.
Yeah, Ralph, what were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna say, this is very much from the outside looking in because I am different from these two guys. I've not played the game, but from everything I've heard, I was wondering, like, okay, so the only real issue that I hear, because the corruption one, I love the solution of pushing it to the end of the turn and giving the people a choice, like using their turn for some choice. Like, do I deal with this corruption now, or could I deal? One of the coolest things I'm hearing is kind of the emergent player choice that comes about through the different scenarios that you encounter and what other players are doing. That's one of the coolest things. And I have other points to make about the corruption as a thought. Sure. But what the one thing that I'm hearing is the redundancy of the feeling of just drawing scrap, and then it doesn't feel like your forge is evolving, whatever. So one thing that popped into my head is for the trees, the skill trees. It's like maybe there could be some form of added effect through the skill trees that affect your forge in different ways. I know, I understand it. It's like I haven't even looked at the balancing of the game and how everything works now, and it's easy to just say stuff like that. But like drawing scrap, I think I don't know how you would get around that, but because I think scrap still works as a concept, and the utility is so integral to the game itself.
We wouldn't scrap it.
Scrap the scrap, yeah. But I was just wondering, like, okay, so have the progression, just tie it into an existing mechanic, and just add something that benefits the forge and feels like your forge is actually getting more powerful.
That's true.
It could be something simple.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to dive into that. We'll have a game design sesh at some point where we can kind of talk through these things and brainstorm some stuff. I'm not gonna go into like everything that happened in there, but I'll go over a couple last things. Kind of the final feedback.
I don't know. By the way, I don't know if you mentioned because we recorded again. We're kind of re-recording some of your thoughts. I don't know if you mentioned in this re-recording that everyone had a different play style.
Oh yeah, I don't remember.
So kind of walk through, because I love that. I love that first time players didn't feel pigeonholed into a certain way of playing. So talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So like I think I said this, like their favorite things about one of the guys' favorite things about it was like the skill tree and just being able to choose how he wanted to build his board. So one of the guys, so on our upgrade track on your forge, when you upgrade your forge by getting XP by crafting things, one guy went all the way through the defense upgrades, and actually he loved it so much. We have an option to buy another upgrade token that's like 2 cores and like 9 scrap, and he saved up and bought that. So he had 4 upgrades on his board at the end, and so he maxed out the defensive track, which like gives him bonus XP when crafting defense, bonus armor to companions, and allows him to play a second companion. And so he did that, had a second companion at the end, and did that whole defensive track. Another guy went all the way through the combat track, and which gives him it's like less scrap to cost it to craft it, steal scrap like on attacks, and then bonus damage to your attacks. And so then like he was hitting us, and then all of a sudden it's like he's hitting us and taking 2 scrap, and it does a bonus damage. And so like he played differently. The other guy went in the utility track, which is what I did too, which gives you like bonus scrap, lets you reroll a die, which actually no one ever used, and gives you an extra action, which also we might need to look at moving that, because the extra action by the time you get to your 3rd upgrade, like game's nearly over, it's not that beneficial. Anyway, everyone played differently. One guy stockpiled resources, had a ton of scrap. He had like 16 scrap at one point, and then bought like 8 cores at once. And then later he kept stockpiling. And then he like would just build up big things. And he had things that had armor and would like keep giving him armor. And so he just had a forge with stack of armor on it. But then another guy had a sword that ignores armor, and so then he could hit that guy with like ignoring all that. So and like the items, they also really like that there's items that could like remove charges. So like you might have this powerful item and be like, oh, what am I gonna do with that? Then someone gets a pulse item, and then now can like target that. So there's constant like fluctuations in the gameplay. Even if you're like, that guy's gonna take us out, something that could then happen to adjust kind of the state of the game.
That's what I was talking about with the emergent gameplay feel. Like,
sure, yeah.
Where different situations and what other players are doing and whatever, it just totally can have a variety of effects on your decision making and what you decide to do. It's really cool.
And then finally, there was a guy who crafted a lot of blueprints, but chose not to use the charges, and just waited until he had 6 items at once, and then just like used all of them at once. And it was really cool, just kind of seeing how people took this and just played how they wanted. Like, these people have never seen the game. They picked it up pretty quick. Some clarifying questions as we went, like I said, but or just say, hey, what does this mean? Like, what does this text means? But overall, like, they understood mostly what was happening, and like once we were a couple turns in, like there weren't a lot of questions besides just like clarifying some wording. So all right, final.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So final thing on feedback. Player 2, his favorite things were the upgrades, the skill tree, because it related to video games. He was the one that loved the shape of the board, really liked the readability. Thought it was really easy to see kind of the tiered items out there and what was in play. Really easy to just kind of know what was going on. Like the readability of the forge board, so you can kind of see where his stats were at, knew what information meant, things like that. The readability was reiterated by the other players as well. Player 3, who, honestly, I don't remember who won now. I don't think I wrote that down. I don't remember if it was player 2 or player 3. That's not good. Anyway, player 3. I took a picture at the end of the game. Maybe
you told him about our podcast, by the way, right?
Yeah, I told him. In our company, I told him I'm the solo person working on everything. So, no, I told him you might try to come.
Basically true.
Next time. Player 3's favorite thing was the upgrade tree again, and he liked the variety of abilities and thought all the things were easy to read on the board as well. So he really liked the variety of gameplay, the emergent gameplay, the different things happening. Player 4, his favorite thing was having the 2 different tracks of like, you have your health track and your XP track. He's like, some games have this weird combo of like a point system where like, which our original design of this game was like forge points, but then when you'd attack, you'd lose forge points, and it was this weird back and forth thing. So he thought they were really well separated. So then their negatives, player 2, he would forget to move the blueprints out, so he'd like craft a blueprint on the forge, but at the end of the turn when you like place it out, he'd like just forget. He was like, it was a small thing. He's like, I just kind of forgot that I was supposed to do that. Player 3 didn't see that you could craft armor on the forge. So like there's like an item you can craft armor. No one did that the entire game. To craft extra armor, even if you had like some extra scrap or extra action, there's just like it wasn't a thing that happened. So maybe that's.
I wonder how that would change the game.
Right, because there were times where like I had scrap and I was like getting low on health, and like it probably would have been beneficial. So maybe it's maybe like reducing the cost on. Someone suggested reducing the cost on that too. And then two of the people they were like corruption was just kind of annoying because it just had one, and it felt like it wasn't ever worth it to cure it, but then it just kept ticking away at his health, and so like what?
Yeah. I have a thought on corruption that I want to get off my head before I forget.
Go for it.
So just the nature of corruption. I feel like now this could be a totally throwaway idea, but I just want to mention it because it sounds like everyone just kind of manages the corruption. And they didn't know, there was a cool decision involved where you could either deal with it or not. And I think a fun way you could play on that could be to ramp up the lethality a little bit on like make it more problematic for the player, but add a benefit to it as well. Give someone a reason to hang on to it, but it makes them more susceptible to actually die.
Interesting. So you're like, I can keep this one on here. It's gonna give me like bonus damage to someone else, maybe, or like something. But I'm still gonna take a damage every turn.
And it gives other players an interesting decision to make too, because I could corrupt this guy and it could kill him in like 2 turns, but it's gonna make him more dangerous in some way. Like, so do I want to do that? Do I want to potentially make this guy like a glass cannon, or not?
Well,
I just think that could be, fun and interesting.
That is really interesting. Especially if you had
people are already managing it and making that decision, like, do I keep it or not? And give you a reason to hang on to it, but also make it worse for you, so that you'd really have to think, like, do I really want to be corrupted?
Right. And maybe it's like it gives you a bonus, but then like Trevor said, it still like escalates each time where it adds one.
I like Trevor's idea.
I only want to keep this for like 2 turns to get this bonus, but otherwise it's going to start wrecking me.
But maybe 2 turns is too late, and you've actually just killed yourself, or like it really becomes this like cost benefit sort of decision. I liked Trevor's idea about making it kind of compound upon itself over time. That's cool.
Interesting. All right, I wrote that down. Anyway, well, we gotta wrap up here in a little bit. But then then the last person's kind of player force feedback on issues was that it was like an engine builder, but it didn't feel like it actually ramped. He thought either adding more scrap, or other things. He had another suggestion of like getting rid of just drawing scrap at the beginning of your turn and making that an action, but then also adding another action where you could just draw a core as your action. And so I don't know if that's the solution. He's like, he's like, this is just a suggestion, like as he's thinking about it, make it 4 actions. And so that way you can still use an action to draw your scrap every turn, but make it like the 3 that you normally get. But then also have an action to just like draw a core for free, or however many. We can talk that through. I don't know if that's a solution or not. It's just something else to think about. And like I said, I've been kind of brainstorming some stuff today that we can talk about later as well. So we'll kind of see, what other things come up. But I have a lot more notes here that we can get into in a session after, some other time after podcast. Just notes that I took of like as things were happening that I've not gone through and like compiled that all. But overall, extremely successful. Going into it, I was definitely like apprehensive of like, I think the game should be in a good spot. I don't really know. Like after making changes and not testing it internally with those changes, like is a little bit, nervous going there, especially like just new people. But anyone listening, I highly recommend like just find people to play test with. People want to help you with your games. They want it, like getting in on the ground floor of this kind of stuff is cool and fun. For a lot of people, and you need to test your game to figure out what's working and what's not working. Like that's the only way you're gonna know if it's good or not. Anyway, any closing thoughts from you guys?
No, I'm glad you took good notes on that. I think it could have been very easy for you to get caught up in the moment and just kind of play it and not really hammer those things down. So I'm glad you took the time to do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't be more thrilled with the outcome of how you're reporting
Yeah.
back. Like I was a little worried that you were going to say people thought it was convoluted or it was too simplistic or, you know, like everyone went combat and you know what I mean? Like I thought that it'd be kind of streamlined in a way. So the way you described it made me very satisfied.
So the one thing I will say, like the guy who really liked the boards and the upgrade tree and stuff, he did say, like, you know, after the fact, when I first brought it out, he was like a little bit overwhelmed by how many things were there. But then as we started going, he was fine. Like it wasn't a big deal.
Like all games these days. It seems more complicated than it is.
Right. It's complicated until you know how it works, and then it's just repeating the stuff. So Ralph, any final things?
No, I love what I'm hearing. It sounds so cool. And we also do have, like, we've been working also on the artwork as well. So we're trying to, you know, make moves there as well. So, you know, things are moving along. While we're not like there or anything with the artwork, we've been chipping away at it, and we're trying to get closer to our vision of the final result of how the cards need to be.
Yeah, for like the frame art around the card and what the cards look like and everything. Yeah. So it's very promising. We got a good direction. I think we're optimistic. I was gonna say like positive, but then that confused with like pessimistic. I'm like,
we're pessimistic.
We're positive. No, it's the opposite.
Actually,
of what I want.
What keeps on happening, basically, for a little look behind the scenes, is I keep on showing them the artwork, and they're like, "I love this. This is so great. Can we change the whole thing to something entirely new and different than it is right now?"
Here's the thing.
And I'm like, "Yep."
Here's the thing.
We'll do that.
This has happened every time. He like shows us something like, "Dude, this is awesome," and then as we start getting into it more, I'm like, "Well, but what if we just didn't do this? And what if we did this other direction entirely?"
Yep.
Because like it's just visually like it looks great. But then as we get into it, it's like, is this what we want it to be? But the current one, the one we have now though, it's it.
It's very good in terms of like the framework style and how it could flow. I think we've really got a good setup.
And it feels unique too. So
I think so. Yeah. And we should talk more
next
about
time.
it too, because
next time.
Yeah. I think but we're getting there. We're making strides. It's feeling good. So
they call him Strider, just like Aragorn.
Oh.
Anyway, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks again for tuning in. If you want to keep up to date on what we're doing, keep listening to this podcast and or watching on the Your Terps. You can also find a link to our Discord at bitwafflegames.com, and we post stuff on Instagram at bitwafflegames. We can see some of our artwork, things we're working on. Thanks again for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. See you guys.
Yep, thanks.
Bye. Hey, we're back real quick. We just wanted to mention that next week we are going to live stream our podcast episode on Twitch, twitch.tv/bitwafflegames, I believe. I think that's just that's it.
Come join us.
Come join us. What day are we gonna do? I can't do Monday next week.
It'd be Tuesday or Wednesday. We'll figure it out, and we'll
gram it out.
We'll gram it out for the two of you that show up.
Yeah, my brother, who I'll text during.
Not Batman.
And I'm going to make sure you can hear my audio. So that's the thing.
That'd probably be a good thing.
Yeah. So go follow us on Twitch to get notified when that's happening. And we'll post something. I don't know what we're gonna stream yet, but something. Okay, bye.